Buying their own apartment was a real event for this family. Maria and Aaron lived in rented apartments for many years with their little son Daniel. A good area, a good view from the window, and most importantly, a very low price, and Daniel finally got his own room. They could only dream of such an apartment. They saved up for it for a long time. They denied themselves everything. Dreams become reality. Yes, the room needed renovation, but it was already trifling. The joy of buying knew no bounds. Nothing in the apartment was out of the ordinary. From the old owner, an elderly man, there were some things that Maria was going to deal with the start of the repair. The first few days were just great. The euphoria from buying a home, pleasant chores, unpacking things, all this was a great pleasure. On the sixth night, something strange happened. Aaron was on the day. He worked in the fire department. Daniel and Masha were already asleep. In a dream, a woman heard some strange sounds, as if someone is walking in the kitchen. At first she was not afraid, but then she heard something break. Maria jumped up and ran to the kitchen. But there was no one there. Only fragments of a mug that had previously stood on the top shelf were on the floor. Maria was very surprised to see this. But then I decided, is it enough? Maybe they put it inaccurately, that's why it fell. And steps, so it could have been heard in a dream. Since that night, everything has changed. Peace has left this apartment. What didn't happen here? Sometimes things fell on their own, windows opened. At night the whole family heard various incomprehensible sounds, creaks, steps, and sometimes even heavy breathing somewhere near them. Dishes broke regularly, especially at night. Family photos could not be put anywhere at all. The frame must have fallen and everything was broken. The whole family had terrible nightmares at night. Especially often they dreamed of some strange, tall man who, for some reason, loudly shouted and cursed at them. Everyone dreamed of him, even little Daniel. Aaron tried to find some reasonable explanations for all these things and reassured the family. But that didn't make it any easier. Daniel began to get sick often. It was very cold in his room, although it was a hot summer outside. No indoor plants took root in the apartment. They withered almost immediately. With the beginning of the repair, strange events have become more frequent. Some strange and very unpleasant smell was added to the aromas of wallpaper paste and paint. At night it was especially strong. But even here the head of the family suggested that this was the smell from the basement. The apartment was on the first floor. You never know what is there. Maybe the cat died. One night, Maria woke up from the fact that she felt that someone was standing next to her. She opened and immediately closed her eyes, because she was very scared. She decided not to wake her husband and try to calm down. But the anxiety only grew, because Maria felt something cold approaching her, and the very vile smell that allegedly came from the basement, according to Aaron, hit her nose more and more. Everything inside her contracted, goosebumps ran all over her body. Then suddenly everything was quiet. She opened her eyes. There was no one was standing near her. Only the smell still lingered in the room. And suddenly someone shouted loudly in her ear. It was not just a cry, it was a real male op. Aaron woke up from this terrible sound. Maria jumped out of bed, abruptly turned on the light, but there was no one except her and Aaron in the room. Only suddenly it became insanely cold, even steam came out of his mouth. From that moment on, no one in this apartment could sleep without light and be here alone. A terrible fear fettered the whole family, and it seemed that there was nothing to calm themselves with. The stench was becoming unbearable. Now, when Aaron was away on duty for the night, Maria, along with Daniel, went to spend the night with her parents on the other side of the city. And every time they returned to their happy apartment, they had the feeling that life was in full swing without them. The dishes often turned out to be stained with some kind of greasy marks. There were traces of someone's presence on the bed and on the pillows, as if someone was lying here in their absence, and it was always very cold. The priest was called, but something did not want to let him into the apartment. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he became very ill. Something was wrong with his heart. I had to call an ambulance. The family decided not to risk other people's health anymore, so they did not dare to call someone else for help. They had nowhere else to live, except in their creepy apartment. Maria's parents lived in a tiny one-room apartment together, and all Aaron's relatives lived in another city, very far from them. Rent an apartment again? But they have their own. And they even started to make repairs in it, to invest all their money. Then it was decided to sell it. Living here became unbearable. Now, in addition, at night, Maria began to feel how someone was trying to suffocate her or press hard on her chest, so that it seemed now it would be impossible to breathe. Daniel constantly cried at night, because it seemed to him that some uncle was pulling his leg out of bed and he smelled terrible. And then Maria noticed bruises on the boy's legs, as if someone was squeezing them hard. Daniel became very nervous and sometimes even cursed when he was very angry. His parents never cursed in front of him. Irritated by every little thing and almost stopped smiling. There were no buyers. It seemed to the family that they were simply cursed and there was no way out of this hell. Maria and Aaron began to rummage through the abandoned things of the past owner, hoping to find at least something that could explain to them what is happening here. Some unnecessary old papers and postcards did not answer their questions. But there were several old photographs that showed the former owner in an embrace with some tall man with a cigarette in his mouth, in this very apartment. With this photo, Aaron went to the neighbors on the landing. An old woman lived next door to her family. She was all alone and no one had ever seen her relatives come to visit her. She rarely left the apartment and was not very sociable. She was alone at home during the day. The rest of the neighbors were at work, so Aaron went to her. He showed her a photo and imploringly asked her to tell her what kind of apartment they bought. The old woman did not really want to talk about it, but apparently she took pity on the young family and told Aaron that a man lived in their apartment. His name was Pete. He was very tall, with rather coarse features. His appearance was repulsive. All his life he lived in this very apartment. He constantly drank, bringing various dubious personalities here. Everyone here was dear. Both drunkards and drug addicts, and women of easy virtue. Pete has a brother, the same man from whom they bought an apartment. He always tried to help his brother, get him out of it, but he stubbornly did not want to change. The old woman called the police many times to calm down the raging neighbor. In moments of a drunken frenzy, he became simply dangerous, yelled obscenities at the whole house, grabbed knives, a hammer. He could even beat his dear guests. Only in the police did everyone was already tired of this man, and at some point no one began to come to the calls of the old woman. Pete promised his neighbor that he would one day kill her for complaining about him. He poured mud over her door, even set fire to it once. And then he hung himself. He left a note in which he wrote in clumsy handwriting that he could no longer hear and see the demons around him, and only in this way could he be freed. Most likely, he saw demons in attacks of fever, so he decided to end it. When Pete was found in the loop, there was a terrible stench in the apartment. Everything was in cigarette smoke, ashes. There was a layer of dirt on the floor. The wallpaper was torn off. The furniture was all shabby. Then brother Pete moved into the apartment. He even began to make repairs here, put everything in order. But he couldn't live here either. Apparently, Pete still lived in this apartment and did not want to see anyone here. As a result, his brother had to sell housing, because he could not stand the attacks of the ghost. At night, the late Pete pulled him abruptly out of bed. There was not a single whole cup or plate in the kitchen. All this happened at night. And that horrible smell, it was already making my eyes water. He then disappeared, then returned with renewed vigor. So this apartment passed to a young family, and Pete's brother left to live on the other side of the world a long time ago, and there are no contacts with him. After that, everything became clear. Aaron told Maria everything and they decided that they would no longer stay here for anything. They very much regretted that when buying they did not ask about what was going on in the apartment before. And would Pete's brother tell the whole truth? And again a rented apartment. And good nights. Daniel began to recover, and it seems that all his anger and aggression slowly faded away. And a new owner was found for the happy apartment, who would later not stand it and run away from there and rent it out. Needless to say, a great many tenants have changed there. As soon as Maria and Aaron received money from the sale, they immediately bought another apartment. A little simpler, a little smaller, and the view from the window is not so colorful. that it was calm here, before that the same family lived there, like them. There was nothing to fear now. Life got better. And that damned apartment burned down a year later. Fortunately, the owner was not injured, he was at work. Only the fire did not spare the apartment of the very old woman whom Pete promised to kill during his lifetime. She died. What caused the fire? No one could explain. Only people on the street during the fire heard how terrible yelling and obscenity came from the open window of this apartment, despite the fact that it was actually empty.
Thank you for your attention. Subscribe to the channel.